Same issues that we're gonna be facing.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Want to welcome everybody to the Royse City Council Special Work Session. That is for January 21st, 2025. The time is now, looks like it's 5:52. Want to welcome and recognize that we have Councilmember Saxton, Councilmember Paul, Councilmember Wilson, and Councilmember Jackson. And I'm looking to see if we got Councilmember Scadden.
I'm here. Yep, I'm here.
Thanks, Randy. Okay, again, thank you for joining us. The focus of this particular work session is going to be addressing the fiscal year 2026 budget preparation process. I'd like to begin, if you don't mind, with some charts and then kind of open up the conversation. So this particular series of charts is just to set the stage to this conversation. And then from that, where we need to go and what we'd like the council to be engaged in. Let me just make sure if I can read what the objective of the meeting is. Royse City leaders discuss options to address funding shortfalls. Agree on a solution to address the impact. City manager integrates the solutions into the Royse City fiscal year 26 proposed budget. Matt's required to have that to us by May 1st, or the first meeting in May. That'll give you a first look at the budget. And then ultimately, the city council will approve then the budget in June of sometime in 2025, according to statute. Okay, next chart, please. Here's the challenge. I tried to define the challenge as best I could. There is no new sales tax revenue coming anytime soon to pay for employee salary increases, operating expenses, or anything else. The only choices the city staff and city council have are to, one, raise property taxes each year for the next several years, cut costs and services for the next few years, not approve any COLAs or merit step increases, or a combination of several things. That's the purpose of this discussion. Since the 2024-25 budget cut 7.5% out of the department's operating budget, continuing this effort could in fact impact operational programs. Chart. Let's talk about the revenue. I pull out of the documents that the city has the status of where we were in revenues. I think it's good detail. I think it provides some real insight in terms of that. I want to draw a couple of things to your attention. If you look at the fiscal year 2023 and 2024, which is the top line under the fiscal year, certainly we're seeing increases in charges for service. But Amber, if I'm wrong with my comment, please help me. But those charges for service oftentimes are directed to specific requirements. Meaning is if we're charging for service to be able to pay water bills, then the intent would be is that's targeted to pay water bills. Operating grants, you can see we've made some grants, but we also have some probably ARPA funds or maybe some other funds that we picked up along the way that has somewhat biased that a little bit as we get the different grants and contributions. Certainly, as you look at the taxes, I want to just focus your attention just for a moment on the tax, the one in the center. As you've seen from from fiscal year 19 all the way to 2024, it was not until fiscal year 2024 that we actually now start to see a reduction in terms of tax revenue coming into the city. Certainly some other columns there, not as big, but they are obviously still important. Next chart. Now, the sales and use tax revenue, the primary source of revenue for Royse City in the general fund. City generates about 8.1 million in 2024 from purchases within the city and by population numbers. I think I've explained a little bit here how the 50-50 rule is used. Local sales tax, use taxes are distributed by 50% at the point of sale. Meaning is that somebody basically bought something within the city. and 50% is generated by statewide distribution according to population. Roy City government has little control over the amount of sales tax use and revenue that we receive, only to establish economic developments to collect more of it, zone for more residential units to be able to increase population, and encourage buy local campaigns. When I say encourage buy local campaigns, what I'm referring to is shop local, and if necessary, order on your computer in your house and have it ordered and delivered to your home. And Roy City gets sales tax as a result of that. There's a mechanism or process. If you look into the Utah Tax Commission, there are records and we can see how much money, and it is a lot, that Roy City gets in large part because of that particular collection of taxes. Chart. Now, if you look at this particular chart, and I've been showing this chart to you, council and staff, probably now a little over 2.5 years, maybe 3 years. There should be no doubt in your mind when you look at the revenue by which Roy City gets. And I go directly to the tax reports from the Utah Tax Commission, and I extract every month what taxes are sent into the city in terms of sales and use tax. There should be no doubt in your mind that has straight line. We're just not generating. I've shared with you the charts prior to this, and we had a really nice upward slope of sales tax revenue coming in. But about December of 2022, the world changed in terms of this particular tax source, and you can see the outcome. It is virtually stabilized. Chart. This particular chart, a different source out of the Utah Tax Commission, now takes a look exactly at the Roy City quarterly gross taxable sales than purchases that have happened. So as we look at the two elements of where our sales tax is generated from, this looks at and is tracking actually how much money people are spending. Now, honestly, I thought we would see, and Matt, I think I mentioned this a couple of times to you, that at some point in time, people are going to say, hey, world's better. I'm just going to spend a whole lot more money. Council, you look at that chart and it indicates there clearly to me and should to you, on the average, they are still spending and spending more. The highest gross that I've seen and I can find in Roy City in terms of the amount of money spent on stuff was right around $132 million a quarter. We've never seen that kind of spending in Roy in any of the data that I have come across. So the spending is going up and it stays up. So if the two equations to sales tax is spending and population, then the only rational reason, and we talked about this, the only rational reason why we in fact have streamlined and flatlined our revenue is because our population is not keeping up. And if it's any consolation to you, most of the cities' data that I have looked at, they're struggling with exactly the same problem. We got a problem. Now we can say, well, where is it? You know, I can't speak to what's happening in Harriman. I can't speak to what's happening in Utah County. But all you have to do is look at the data, and the data says some of the highest populated areas are actually in those southern parts of the counties. And they're not here. Chart. So the logic is, so it must be population. The Roy City population went from 39,544 in 2020 down to 38,591 or 92 in 2024. And I looked at the data in terms of what the data projects the 2025 is going to be in Roy. It's going to drop even more. It's going to go down to 38,216. So we are on a gradual slope. Now, I'm not going to argue. I mean, I don't like what I see, to be honest with you. I'm still struggling to find out exactly where the tax commission gets that data. But it's in their documents. I've looked at their documents, and the bottom left-hand corner for Roy shows that population declining. And trust me with this comment, the taking of the homes, which was about 52 homes on 5,600 in terms of that process, did not cause 1,000 people to be out of Roy. These numbers are generated in a different way than in terms of what we think is intuitively what they should be. But here's what it does say. The Utah Department of Workforce Service in August of 2024 showed the population of Roy City at 25th in the state out of 329 cities. I remember clearly back in 2019, when I looked at this data, we were number 20 and not 25. We were number 20 largest cities in Utah. In that short period of time, we have dropped to 25th and we're continuing will drop. So this rapid reduction in population compared to other cities is impacting Roy City's portion of the sales tax rate. Funds that normally would have came to us are now going to other cities because they have higher population numbers. And the only reason, and I can't be specific, but intuitively, I think I'm accurate with this comment. The only reason why Roy City is keeping the same revenue stream is because our people buying in Roy continues to grow. It just keeps growing. And as long as we keep that, then I guess we'll stay even. It's either that or we have to bring a lot more population in so we get more than 50%. That's the issue that we really need to address. And we got to figure out how we're getting past that. There's the numbers. You can pull the data if you'd like. I can even show you specifically what kind, and I've sent charts to you, specifically what kinds of businesses are generating, in essence, the increases in the purchases in Roy. And I will tell you without doubt, the single biggest purchases is foods and groceries. They are smoking everything else. Bring us another Harmon's, bring us another Winco, bring us another Kent's, bring us one of those big ones and bring that into Roy. Those numbers was increased significantly. But without those, challenge is going to be is how do we keep up? Okay? Chart. So here's the property taxes. The next major source of revenue for Roy City is generates 4.5 million in taxes in 2024. State law restricts the city to receiving the same dollar amount in property tax as it did the previous year, except for taxes from new development. So if you brought a new business in, we would see the increase of taxes, or unless the city undergoes what's called the truth and taxation process. You know exactly what that is. We've done it now twice over the last couple of years. As property values increase, the certified tax rate decreases. This means that when a home value rises, the city does not collect additional taxes based on inflationary growth. And if you looked at that, and I looked at for the last 5-10 years, if we did not impact by a truth and taxation process, the value of the homes went up. And when they went up, our rate went down, except in 2022. Now, in 2022, and I won't go into what the county assessor or whoever was responsible for that. If you looked at your tax bill, the value of the properties went way up. Way up. And then in 2023, they dropped significantly. In 2022, Roy City Council passed a 10% property tax increase. But you know what? I've not heard one complaint. And why I didn't hear a complaint is because the value from the previous year dropped, and the net zero was it hid that 10% property tax increase. It just hit it, which was fine. Nobody got complaints, got the revenue coming in. But the fact of the matter is that was more as a consequence because they devalued my house and your house and a lot of houses. So the real issue was we didn't get to see that. The city must set its budgets based on the same revenue as the prior year or change the certified tax rate through the truth and taxation process. If you're going to use property tax then as a mechanism to go ahead and generate revenue, which property tax then would be the second largest revenue stream for Roy City, then you have to generate through the truth and taxation process, or you better darn well bring in a big development. And that development then just needs to be taxed as a new development. Roy City government, specifically the city council, does have control over property tax. You have very little control over sales tax, but the council does have control over property tax. Chart. Now, I wanted to give you a little comparison as you start to see where does Roy then stand in terms of property tax rate. Now, understand rate times the market value of the home, or what they call the taxable value of the home, is really important. So if you were to look at Roy's home value and maybe look at the value of a place up in North Ogden, the value of the properties in North Ogden are going to be higher. So they could probably have a little bit of a less rate if they're generating the same amount of money because the value of the property is more. So there is some flexibility. But that rate right there you're looking at is our 2024 rate, and we are number 4 in the county in terms of property tax rate. Now, it's a little deceiving. So what I want to do is I want to show you the next chart. Now, if you take in consideration now that all of the municipalities by some fashion or form has a fire district, some of them hire out the fire service into the city, whereas Roy, Riverdale, Ogden, some of the other cities actually have their own fire service. So if you include then the fire service as part of the equal benefit of the property tax rate, now you can see Roy City today is actually 8th and not 4th. If you include and put everybody equal, that the cities, in fact, what they charge for property tax and what they charge also property tax if they have to buy fire service outside of the city. That's a better picture to paint in terms of where Roy City sits in terms of equal, in terms of property tax rate. You okay with that? I want to make sure you see that, because sometimes people complain and say Roy City has a high property tax rate. Well, not compared to that.
So what if you put the police force into it? Because several of those cities have hired out for the sheriff. So I'm gathering that our rate might be going down even further if you included that.
Well, what's interesting about that conversation is the police force is not a property tax entity. And so they have to take that out of the general fund and pay for that service. Whether they pay for it as we do through the general fund into the police department, or whether they take money out of the general fund and pay the sheriff's office to provide that, we're paying for that service. So, but purely in terms of property tax, because this is a property tax assessment, you can tell by adding the fire service, it cost. And if you didn't notice by this chart, let me point it out to you. There are 2 municipalities in Weber County that do not have property tax. West Haven and Marietta Slaterville. But if you look in terms of, they also have to pay for fire service. So you would think intuitively it says, well, they must be at the bottom of the list. Not true. Plain City, it looks like at this moment, has the best quote property tax rate in the county. Not West Haven and not Marietta Slaterville, because you have to include the Weber Fire Service that those cities have to pay for. Okay, I'm just trying to give you a perspective because property tax rate is an issue, how people feel and what it's going to cost, and definitely what businesses have to pay to be able to establish in Roy. Chart. Okay, this just simply points to where we in fact have property tax increases over the few years. We had one in 2026, 2027 at 37%. We did not have any others. And then we had another one in 2021, 2022, and another one in 24, 25. Okay. Chart. Now, just to summarize all this, so you kind of see where the money is coming from. If you're looking at just at tax revenue, then these charts give you a little bit of a perspective in terms of where the money is and where we're getting it. And again, I just want to point out that between 2023 and 2024, our sales tax revenue dropped. Our property tax revenue, pretty stable. Our franchise tax, pretty stable. And to be honest with you, when I pulled my landline phone out of my house, I stopped paying into that tax. And I suspect I'm not alone, okay? Paramedic fees, that's one we'll, obviously, we still need to place in when it comes, and then the motor vehicle fees there. So you get a really good perspective in terms of looking at tax revenue, in terms of how it's impacting us and where we're going, just by the numbers. Chart. So let's talk about expenses. Chart. Okay, in this chart, the point of this chart would be is I want you to really look at terms of how the money is spent. Certainly general government, the CARES Act, I won't get a lot of detail about that. That was quite a few years ago. Certainly public safety, highways, parks and rec, capital outlays, water, sewer, stormwater. This gives you a perspective as you look at this of where we are in terms of our expenses to provide that service. And if you look at public safety in 2021, 2022 jumped almost $4 million, a little over $4 million to 2023 and 2024. You can see the growth that has taken place on the rest of them, okay? The other part is no new development is coming that will fix this problem. I'm not aware of anything. There's certainly a lot of talk. We're looking at issues, but you cannot drive around and simply says that development is going to generate us $1 million. It just isn't there. Chart. I wanted you to look in terms of the cost of people. In three terms. First, how many people are involved? What the percent of the budget has been over the years, and I pulled those numbers directly out of the proposed budget. Every proposed budget that I have, and I've got them dated all the way back to 2016, it tells me exactly how much of that budget is in fact personnel. And then the actual amount. And again, pointing to the 2021, 22 to 2024, we jumped a considerable amount of money in terms of these last few years. Chart. This is where the full-time employees are today. And we believe this is where the full-time employees will be tomorrow as we go in there. Unless there's some adjustments or changes, this is how it sits today. You can kind of see where the bodies are in terms of the 163 people we have in our organization. Chart. This one talks about the part-time employee or seasonal employees who has, I try to make a distinction because there's a lot of people, about 229 of them. And I wanted you to make sure you've seen where they're allocated. Certainly we got summer hires that are basically associated with Parks and Rec. Certainly we got temp seasonals that are associated with crossing guards, and we have 2 receptionists in finances. Honestly, I can't tell you anything about anybody else. I'm sure there's a reason. I'm hoping that you can look at the data and maybe ask the questions, but here are the numbers. And with that equates to $1.4 million in employee costs to be able to purchase their services. Chart. Now, this chart is a little bit interesting on a couple of points. Let me just make sure you kind of understand. If you look at this in terms of personnel salary increases, man, I've been at this 10 years, 11 years, however long it's been. It seems to me, most of my time as a city council member, mayor, we've always tried to tackle this challenge. I remember specifically in 2019, when the fire department employees received a salary increase. The fire chief stood up. We were already in the final stages. We were about ready to approve the budget. And he stood up and says, I need more. And the council gave him more. In January of 2022, the city council approved $1.5 million in salary increases from a salary survey. That 1.5 million came right out of the fund balance. That's where it came. In 2022, shortly after that, we went into a 10% property tax increase a few months later to try to make up some losses. Somehow I remember there was a conversation we needed to buy, I think, a couple of firefighters and I think a couple of police officers. I could go back in the detail, but it's not relevant. August of 2024, the city council approved 11.2% property tax increase just to pay for the COLA. COLA come in at about $500 some odd thousand. Merit was actually paid, if you remember, which come in about 640,000 came in because they went and cut 7.5% out of their operational budget. That paid for merits. It needed the 11.2% property tax thing to take care of the COLA, and that was approved. Chart. And then when you look at COLA, which is an interesting piece, I wanted to share this with you. We're kind of all over the board in terms of COLA. Some municipalities and counties says whatever the COLA is, that's what it is. But as you can see, we kind of changed that COLA around a little bit in terms of the actual number, which is, you know, I mean, there's some reason behind it. We just don't go into this blindly. The council has to assess that, make a decision, and when they're making these adjustments, make the adjustments what makes sense. That's what was approved. Now let's get into the heart of why we're here. Chart. Okay. I'm going to be honest with you, Amber, Matt, this one shocked me. It came from the CAFR. I looked at those numbers. And I looked at those numbers 3 or 4 times. I still struggle with this chart. It was officially approved. It certainly talks to the issues, but it talks about activity in what appears to be some main areas within the city. The data in the CAFR basically says they came from our department sources. If they provided it, it must be right. So there it is. You can certainly look at those and see if in fact there's some information in there that we just need to have a better understanding of what's happening there. But I'll leave that to your judgment, but that's the activity. Make note, Aquatic Center, how often, Michelle, is that open? 4 months, 5 months?
Out of the summer.
Yeah. 95,000 people walk through that gate. If that doesn't set you back in the chair, I'm not sure what would. That's a lot of people. Okay. Now, the complex emissions, we know the issue with that. That one has more to do about the issue with the fact it was out of service for over a year. So just recognize that last couple of years are biased. But there's some significant numbers here, okay? And to be honest with you, it's still growing. I suspect they'll beat those numbers this year. So again, just part of the database, look at all sides of this. Let's see where we go. Start. Here is the issue. The city council and seniors need to define the way ahead. City residents, employees, business owners expect government leaders to find solutions to problems. Since this revenue problem is systemic, and what I mean by systemic, I don't see anything that's going to increase the revenue coming into Roy City over the next few years. There's certainly some big projects. But these big projects, even the ones that I'm aware of, if they fall within an area dealing with the RDA, and the RDA uses TIF, that's tax increment financing, we will get just a small portion of that revenue. Bulk of that revenue would basically establish that capability for 15 years. So the big projects, and there are some things we've talked about, there's some things that's kind of planned out. Even if they put them in, started breaking the ground today, Roy City will not see a dime on that property improvement for at least 2 years. And because it happens in key areas within the city, the majority of the funds taken out of that would have come to Roy City as a property tax increase because it's a new development Roy City will not realize. Because the TIF will take that away to help fill the gap needed for us to get that development in place. That's the reality. The approach to address this specific issue is to focus on a few possible solutions and dig into the detail. Here's what I'm asking of you, council. Look at the data, ask the questions, get with the experts. You've got them all sitting right here. Ask them, hey, if we did this, what's the impact? Pros and cons. If we looked at this, what can we do with this? To assemble that information, get that information. And so when we meet again, we'll really have an opportunity now to sit down and says, hey, what's this possibility? What's that possibility? Because what the city manager needs from us is clear direction. So when he frames this new budget going into next fiscal year, he is focusing on what you provide him to focus on. And so it will not be a mystery to you when we get to June and we're asked to vote and you're set up and you have to vote. Otherwise, on May 1st, and I'm gonna make a projection here, he will walk in because he has no other choice, no other direction. He will walk into the council with a draft document, putting in front of you a 20 to 25% property tax increase. I can't see how he cannot have that. And you will see that same 20 to 25% increase the next year, and the next year, and the next year, until such time you can bring in a development or a source for revenue that's going to pay the $1.1 million of new money we have to come up with to pay for salaries, specifically merit increase and COLAs. I'd ask the pros and cons. I would look at the requirements, come back for an open discussion. And the solution that we're looking for may not be a single idea. It could very well be a combination of ideas. I'm going on a public record here, okay? So that recording you got here, you can repeat what I'm about to say. Roy City needs to start seriously having a modest property tax increase every year. Every year. If for no other purpose, just to keep up with the cost of life that we have to pay. We have no choice. But there may be some other options, because if we truly only look at property tax as the only way out of this thing, in 3 years, you will double the property tax in Roy City. In 6 years, you will double it again. And there's no solution unless we find real solutions that are permanent. So we need to have a hard conversation and a discussion on that chart. I'm almost done, council. It may very well be services. It may very well be personnel. It may very well be operations. It may very well be revenue. This cannot be a single entity or a single function if we're going to make this work. We may have to look at all of them. But I will tell you, it's not easy. And I kind of put those in a little bit from descending order. Top might be the easiest. Bottom of each category is going to be painful. You start cutting services, try to pick the services you no longer ever want to do. You want to basically tell the employees no COLA or merit increases? Let's let that message get out to the public and our people and see what they think about that choice. Decreased dependency on interlocal agreements, raising property taxes. I mean, these are serious issues. I'm hoping we can draw solutions above the bottom. That, I think, is where the answer is going to be. Okay, last chart. This is just, get your thoughts. What do you think?
I'd like to just jump in with a couple of questions. So on the 7.5% cut that we had last year, Can you be a little more specific on what those were, that those things were that we had to cut? And does that mean that we could continue that cut, or that was a one-year thing and those are items or supplies or things like that, that we probably need to be doing this year? So where does that fit in?
So to kind of explain how we went about that is we didn't take the personnel, so we took everybody's budget and we took the personnel costs out of that budget. Because some departments are a little heavier on personnel costs and some are more operational. And then we did a 7.5% cost cut of operations, so it didn't include any of the personnel. Each department had the ability to go in and make those cuts themselves. And to itemize those cuts, I mean, the list was honestly forever long. We could get you those lists because we have compiled them together. I don't have them in front of me. But just for instance, like Parks and Recreation cut a fertilization out of the Parks Department. I don't know if you want to go around the room and each of them can talk a little bit about their own. A lot of training was cut. There was, I mean, it was just across the board, just cuts in almost every account that you can think of. So we do have a list, like I said, but it wasn't just, you know, to say that we could cut even further than the 7.5%. I don't know how deep we can cut into those departments before they become useless. Like some of the things that were cut out of the complex scare me because, I mean, some of those costs we don't really control. And it seems like every time we go and enter into a new contract, the costs just increase. Anytime we do anything, it seems like it's just more than it was yesterday. I don't think that that's anything unique to Royse City. That's something that everybody has been dealing with as well. But the price, for instance, like the complex where I was going with that is the chemicals they use, we can't dictate of what that's going to cost the city, but some of those accounts were cut. And I don't know if what the chemical usage is at the aquatic center, a lot of that deals with the weather and usage and different things. But some of those predictions, I don't know where we're at until the end of the year. So it does worry me, you know, so some of them are things that we can control and some of them are out of our control as well, so.
But you would agree with this comment. There's a reason why, Michelle, you put, okay, chemicals in that pool. Skimp on those requirements, what's the impact?
So to summarize, basically, there are a few of the cuts that may possibly be okay to be permanent, but most of those cuts we're gonna need to rebound and put back into those services, put back into place. So that was gonna be more of a one-time cut, but that needs to be put back into the budget for this year, most of that.
Yeah,
biggest
and
percentage
if
of that.
we, you know, because we're kind of working backwards on that, because then you have to come up with that 7.5% and the added money as well. So yes.
So we're really talking about, if you look at cuts, you're talking about cuts that are, for the most part, permanent. I don't see a mechanism in this process that says, well, we'll just do it for 1 year and we'll basically, next year will be fine. We just don't have the revenue stream coming. And remember, the intent would be is that we still need to keep our employees competitive. We have to pay a competitive rate to keep our employees to provide the service. Then the issue would be is where do we come up with that money? And the only way to come up is make the cuts if the cuts are the decision. And if that's the case, then the fact of the matter is that you can't add those expenses back into the budget. You got to cut that again the following year and the following year. And so it's a systemic problem that has to be addressed and solved, not a one-time and done issue. And I don't, you know, I mean, I've looked at this thing so many different ways, and honestly, I cannot see any solution here that's going to be good, except maybe a combination of solutions that might get us where we need to be.
Well, we'll be getting revenue right from Walmart in West Haven when they do that. Trader Joe's, property that we sold, we'll be getting some property tax for that. Hopefully that will kick off some building down there.
Be ready to answer that, Amber, because I think the conversation really needs to understand exactly what she's saying, because intuitively you would think, well, they're coming. Walmart's being planned, and we could see breaking ground in West Haven across from Midland Drive this year.
Right.
Hooper is considering, okay, a Smith's on 5,500. They don't like it. City council's not supported it,
Right.
but there's a lot of pressure to put that new Smith's marketplace down there. Those are actually taxed in a different city. 50% of that sales tax revenue from that particular sold part is going to go into the city by which it was actually purchased. The other 50% is going to go based on population.
Right.
And so if you look at the entire population, Roy City's population numbers are dropping. And Harriman and places south are just going through the roof. Even West Haven is projected
Well,
to
yeah,
continue.
because look at their property. We're built out.
Bingo.
I mean, so we can't say that we're gonna grow. Of course, West Haven, all those cities that are west of us, that they travel through our city are obviously gonna grow because they have land. I mean, we do have some parcels that hopefully someone will buy and build on, but I just think truth in taxation and a small tax increase every year. I mean, I have family, brothers and kids that live in Roy, and they would totally keep our employees, who wants to come to Roy? I mean, people that look up Roy City. It's a welcoming city, has a good fire department, police department, good cities, complex, grocery stores, aquatic center. And people want to come to Roy because of those reasons, but they want to have good services and good employees. And we have to pay our employees and keep up with their merit raises and their COLAs, because we want to keep those good employees in Roy.
Yep.
And so I think a small tax increase to keep them here every year, to keep our city as a family-based, I don't know, I look at all of our departments at families, because I feel that that's how they work, as a family. And I feel that's how Roy High is run too. And I just think that that's the only way we're gonna be able to keep our city running. People expect it. If you want the best police department, the best fire department, and you want good services, then that's just life. That's just how things go. Thank heavens we have 4 grocery stores. And everybody has to eat, and thank heavens we do our part in Amazon and our family. So we pay those taxes, but I just think that we have to, we can't get rid of employees. We can't, I don't know, we just have to can't give them any false hope. We have to give them something to look forward to and know that they're working and knowing that they're gonna get paid for their services.
Yep.
So.
So,
Randy?
yeah, sorry. So one thing that I've kind of like kicked around is, again, an employee is the cost that keeps on giving. Do we, and again, this is as department heads, kind of starting to think, I don't know what the appetite of the council would be, but taking and doing like early retirement buyouts, because most people that are looking to retire are at the top of the wage scale. Whereas suppose when we go to backfill that position, we can get somebody in at a lower cost basis. And again, if we could take and incentivize somebody to take an early retirement, we could take out a general fund balance, pay them out, some type of payout structure or something that we could take and provide them to take an early retirement. I don't know how many people like that exist within the city. But if there are any people within, your particular departments, that might be, I don't know, it would be something that I as a council member would take and entertain. And like I said, this year, first and foremost, thank you, Mayor, for pulling this forward. This is, and the subsequent upcoming years are going to be incredibly, incredibly difficult because, as has been illustrated just by this, that we only have really 2 sources of revenue within the actual city. You can, as a citizen, go out and spend your own money, and congratulations, we'll get, our portion of the sales tax revenue. Or I have to reach into your back pocket, into your, wallet, or into, a lady's purse, and take money out of your finances in the form of a property tax. And so we're going to have to get incredibly, incredibly creative in terms of how we go about looking at how we can generate different sources of revenue. I mean, like I said, this is going to be difficult, and thank you again, like I said, for pulling this 6 months into the future, because this is going to be something that we're all going to have to think about over the course of going into the next budget cycle. So that's just, I wanted to put that out there. But also to piggyback off of Council Member Jackson's statement, I don't think we have a choice. We need to get into the habit of having a truth in taxation every year. We need to, it's kind of like the old, how do you boil a frog? You do it very, very slowly. You gradually turn the temperature up. And unfortunately, I think that's what we're going to have to do with the tax rate. As opposed to, as you go back to some of your charts where we have these large jumps, where we're effectively playing catch up, as opposed to taking and gradually doing it. So, I mean, I like I said, I think, I'm going to go on the public record as a city council member right now that we will be raising people's property taxes in June, where we are going to be forced into a truth in taxation. If not, again, to Council Member Jackson's point, we're not going to retain the talent that our constituents have come to expect in terms of what Roy takes and provides. So that's all I got to say about that.
Well, I'd like, Randy, and appreciate your comment about people buyouts. Organizations have done that. They're successful. If they can run the numbers and determine who would be a best candidate for that, and they would be considered doing that. Certainly some of the people who retired recently from the city were some of the very highest paid people in the city. When we put the replacement in, the individual came in at a significantly different salary, and that helped us to basically find extra revenue. How wide that could be, how much would it cost? That's probably something that could be explored, but I would recommend, as you made the statement, I would probably sit down with Amber, whoever might have some of that kind of data, and flush out and see what that looks like. We may not get everybody, but if we get enough, maybe we can save enough money, because there will be a cost the general fund would have to pay to give them that buyout, but it may give us enough when we have to replace them that we can do it at a lower salary. We can make up a pretty good piece of this $1.1 million that we need. So good strategy. And to your comment, when you say land purchases, Roy City has got properties on the market. City council can certainly go up there and say, yeah, we're going to use some of that money to pay this bill. But we only have so much land that we can sell. And we don't want the land to be, we need to get the land where it's making money, but we don't want to use the land just simply to bail out the city year after year. But certainly it is a city council decision. And I would probably go up there and say, okay, what kind of money are we talking about here? If Brody can basically complete a couple of the projects that he is working, there's going to be an opportunity for some money to come out of that. Does the city council believe it's in the best interest of the city to use some of that money to help get us through these next couple of years? Get the numbers. Let's find some answers. That's a good comment.
Well, and if we had a buyout, but then, like you said, hire somebody in a lower rate, but it's so competitive, like fire and police with all the other cities. I mean, obviously be lower because, if you're retiring, somebody's got 25 years in, obviously they're not going to come in. But I sit with the fire chief from North Ogden, and when he tells me how much they pay their firemen compared to ours, it blows my mind. So we just have to be competitive and try to keep people to stay here too, and not be a training ground for fire and police, and then have them go to other cities. It's just to do what we can to, I mean, same in water department, public works, every department feels like we train them and then somebody woos them, to another city because of a higher pay, and you can't blame them. They got to take care of their family. So I don't know.
When we're documenting salaries that we've talked about, does that include the cost of the benefits, or are those numbers including benefits or not?
Which section? So sometimes yes, salary, usually not. So there's usually, like, if you're pulling from state websites, that's usually separated out. So you got a salary and then you got a benefit side. So you gotta be careful with some of those numbers too, because benefits can fluctuate depending on, you know, if you use vacation, if you don't use vacation, if you use vacation, it goes into your salary part, but if 1 year you decide to take, I'm gonna use all my vacation this year, that goes into a benefit side, so your salary actually decreases, you're getting paid the same. So some of that information, all I'm getting at is it's not always 100% accurate.
And then when we're determining the COLA rates, when is that determined? Is that determined in May or June or?
So we basically go line, like employee by employee to determine that. So we look at their actual wage. We say, you know, have they gotten their merit increase? Because some employees get their merit increase depending on their anniversary date. It could be in, you know, when we're doing the budget, they could be getting it in June. When we're doing the budget, you know, a lot sooner than that. So we always calculate that out and then times that by the COLA amount,
So
employee by employee.
the way we've calculated it over the last 2 years is we've looked at what Social Security has given. And then we have looked at what URS has given and what the state has given. And the last 2 years, those have almost been the exact same amount. So we've kind of averaged those and that's what we have given.
And so those rates are done before we do ours, so that's like around May or June.
Yeah, so as we start putting the budget, we send it out in February to all the departments. They send it back to me the end of February. We start putting all that together in March. And that's usually, like Social Security just barely sent theirs out. They're looking at about a 2.5 for 2025. And then the state and URS is on the same cycle we are, so that will come out about the same time.
Okay. And when they're talking about longevity bonuses, what does that equate to in regards to the merit and that sort of thing?
The longevity bonuses, if I understand correctly, are typically the employees that are maxed out on their wage scale, so they are not getting a merit every year. So depending on where they're at on the wage scale, there's a longevity bonus that they can receive instead of receiving a merit increase.
And is that a set thing that they get it for sure every year and?
It would go with their evaluation, so if they pass their evaluation, they would be eligible for that longevity bonus.
And then we're talking about decreasing the population in Roy. When does that lower population equate to change in staff needs? I mean, is it a 5% or a 10% or that sort of thing?
You know, that's a pretty interesting question because, I mean, that's, again, back on you of what level of service do you want and what level do you feel like we don't need those employees anymore? Because that, you know, I can say that every department head, when they're going through their staffing, a lot of departments feel like they need more and more, you know, because they're so busy. But at what level do we want as a city drop that staffing? And remember that those estimates, the only real good snapshot you have of a population is off the census. Now, I kind of feel that was a little skewed this last time. The state of Utah, they get their information off of the census and they're backing into those population numbers. They don't do that census all but every 10 years. And so if you look at the last census over the other one, we were taking a little bit of a decline as a city. And so that's just whatever statistical, you know, how they come up with that. And that's the census, and that's the only way you can change it, because you could truly argue that if you do a massive development somewhere in the city and build more of a dense population, I could say that I don't think the next number of the next year's numbers would increase by that amount, because they're not polling anything. It's just an estimate. And so maybe in the next census, it kind of resorts back to, you know, maybe even increase. So.
Remember that next census won't hit till 2030, and more than likely we will not see the results till probably 2032. And so the challenge we have would be is that the census went down in a COVID year. And some people probably didn't open their doors. And I think we have a whole group of people who in the city who basically would not open their door to anybody in government. And so I don't think they got the count. And so I think there's some real problems with how they set that. And I don't even know how to be able to accurately detect it. It's just that we're projecting and we're looking at 39,564. 39,564 is what we went into the census believing. That's not what come out of the census. And I think the census was, I think it was less than accurate in large part because of the condition of what that census had to basically be done. All I can say is that I'd hate to wait till 2030 or 2032 to be able to say we're back in the game, because they're going to use their formulas to set Royce City's population numbers, and that population number is going to go directly into how much revenue we get,
Whether it's accurate or not.
whether it's accurate or not.
Mhm.
Well,
And we got your attention. Well, we're not going to fix this today, but here's what I'd like you to do, okay? If you will simply say, okay, I got some information. Start thinking about what you think you would like to ask a department head, what you would like to sit down for an hour and talk to Matt about. Get some ideas of some things you think might be at least conversations you'd like to bring back, ideas that you think might we look at. Certainly Randy, who popped off, said, why don't we talk about this buyout idea? Maybe that's an interesting idea. What would that yield us if you had the numbers run out? And then look at ways to do this in such a way that we take little bits of things and we come up with an answer rather than take a big swing at one thing and expect that's going to sit well with anybody. Because either side of this conversation, it's either going to impact employees or it's going to impact residents. You're either going to have to cut services or you're going to have to cut people. Or you're just going to get a lot of people upset by says, we're not going to give you any cost of living allowances. There's nothing, in my opinion, good about any of this conversation. That there are conversations we got to have and decisions that need to be made. And we need to tell Matt, as a collective group, we need to say, Matt, here's what you need to focus on as you now prepare that budget, because Amber is right. In February, every department head is going to be expected to start assembling their budgets, to get it into the city can scrub it, to have a document ready for you on May 1st, or the first city council meeting in May, where you're going to now have your shot at it, and you'll roughly have 2 or 3 work sessions to be able to finalize something before you're expected to approve it. We think this is the best way, because now you can see the problem and you can give him some directions over the next probably a month or 2, so that he can start assembling a budget that you think you can live with. Are we okay with that?
Chief Wynn. So we think that these numbers aren't really accurate for our population, but in your department, you're seeing effects of whether the population is steady or not steady or not. Can you just maybe discuss what you see in your department needs versus the population we hear about as numbers, and how that equates to what your, the needs and requirements are for you and your staff?
So anecdotally, I agree that I believe the census count in 2020 was an undercount. Again, that 38,000 they came to, that was reverse engineered. I don't know how they get there. That's a 2.5% assumption in decrease in population. I don't know if that decreased to 2.5% less call volume. Here's what I do know. I'm going to be getting ready to do my stats for my council report coming up here in the next few months. While there's an argument to be made that crime overall, reported crime is down, we do know that violent crime is up. So violent crime typically takes more personnel and more hours to get through those types of cases. The other thing is Utah is second to dead last in officers per capita. And we're actually below we're actually below average in Weber County. So even if we were looking at population averages and our per capita staffing, we're actually below average right out of the gate. So violent crime increases, personnel requirements increase. Foundationally, we're below average when it comes to staffing.
And so one of the things that you had to cut was like the bullets, like last year, I remember.
Yeah, we cut our training and equipment in half
Yeah.
each.
And so when you ended up, the end of your budget year, did you end up going in the negative then? Because you didn't have enough to cover everything?
No, we fortunately had enough ammunition to get us through this training year. Like, it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, and I just got Amber the information the other day, any decrease that we made last year, we're gonna be paying out more, 30,000 for CSI next fiscal year, 30,000.
Mm.
That's gonna be our new rate. The TASER contracts, all these subscriptions, those are increasing every year. We have no control over those. We're just passed through for most of it.
In regards to some of the discussion, we hear that tax rates really don't mean anything. We get these tax rates, but what does it really mean? So you're starting the legislature thing. Could we maybe change the lingo so it's not a tax percent thing, but it's like dollar amount that because I think it's more understandable as a dollar amount. But when you say these tax percentages that really don't mean anything, I think that helps everybody. It helps council members, staff, citizens.
I agree. Like, when we have these discussions in here, like, the emotion is what runs the day outside of this room, right? Because we're supposed to be objective and neutral. So we talk about increasing a tax rate 25%. What does that really mean? It could be, $10, $15 a month. That's not what people hear. They hear 25%. And when they look at a tax bill, they see a county tax bill of $3,500. What they don't see is the Roy City portion of that line item is only $200, right? And so we have to be careful messaging, because you can be assured that other people are going to be messaging it a different way. You heard the governor speak during his press conference the other day about how, the state has saved taxpayers 10% in income tax savings over the last year, as far as the budget's concerned. The actual dollar amount, I think, was close to, was it two, like 1 point something billion in savings. They're actually leading out this year, like, with another $200 million proposed in tax cuts. I don't know what the percentage is, but whoever wants to make the argument to suit them, they're gonna use the rate, or they're gonna use the actual monetary value. And you guys are just gonna have to pick a message and lead with it.
Well, that was like last year when we did the 11.26%. I asked Amber, so how much is that actually a month? Because people just hear that and freak out and said it was like $14. So, I mean, I think $14, I guess, is a lot to some people, but when you consider that it's, gonna keep your fire and your policeman covering the city, it's very little, in my opinion. I mean, you spend that much going to the burger bar or go and get a fizz drink every day. And so, I don't know, like I said, I have family who lives in Roy, kids and brothers, and they're willing to pay that small tax increase, or just to keep Roy a safe place to live, so.
Yeah, interestingly enough, sorry, are you done, Ed?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry, can I respond to that? The county actually did a retirement buyout not too long ago. And the results are mixed. They had people that didn't take it. They had people that took it and stayed out. They had people that took it and wish they would have stayed. So they've had mixed results. They just implemented a $10,000 bonus this year that's getting paid out. I think it's once a quarter, about $2,500. Ogden City, they're actually targeting our lateral officers. They're targeting our experienced staff. We just had one leave last week, and when he walked in the door at Ogden City, they gave him a check for $7,500, and he cashed that one with his vacation that he earned here. So Like, that's what we're up against. That's just the reality.
Go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, so no, I was just going to say, I won't say who the constituent was that I ran into out in public, but just this last weekend, I ran into a constituent and I was just kind of joking with him. I was like, hey, don't hate me because I'm more than likely going to have to raise your property taxes this year. And he looked me dead in the eye and said, it is what it is. And again, that's the thing that this all comes down to framing. And the framing that we have to give is the fact that do you want, when your, water main breaks out in, the road, do you want the guy that's been around for the longest of time and knows how to go out and quickly and easily, plug that hole? Do you want the paramedic or firefighter who, has 10 years worth of experience, who when they, and I'll give a personal example, my nephew, on Christmas had, a medical issue and ended up having Roy, fire come out. Do you want the paramedic who's just 3 months out of high school, or 3 months out of, his paramedic EMS program, there on scene by himself, with, another maybe person that's only been there for a year? Or do you want them paired with somebody who's been, a paramedic now for 10 years? So again, this is the framing that we're going to have to take and, give to our constituent base. It's like, what level of service are you willing to take? And again, like, I guess I take it from the perspective of I'm to the point in my life where I don't mind paying a little bit extra to have a lot better service. And I think I can't say I definitively speak for, our constituency base, but I think the vast majority of citizens are fine with a, an increase in property taxes to pay for that better level of service and that more experienced individual that's coming to, provide the services that the city takes and provides. So that's all I got to say.
Another question in regards to one of the ideas of establishing a volunteer police service program. Do you feel that there are some duties that a level like that could free up some of your staff?
What's our liability on that, though? I mean, that's where I go. I think there's more risk there than.
It's more to have volunteers than it does. That you
So
pay.
I will tell you, I'm not here to say like volunteerism is dead. What I can tell you is we used to have a reserve program that could have helped with that. That has faded away because people aren't willing to do that type of volunteer work anymore. We had VIPs at one point and there was just no participation rate. The county actually has VIPs. They say there's a successful. I don't know what kind of model they're running, but when we have a minimum crew staffing of 3, right, which could be as much as a sergeant, 2 officers, I would dare say they're not going to be ecstatic about having to supervise civilian employees that are out there actually creating more call volume that may not be exigent. And so we try to do what we can to incentivize our folks to be proactive. But they can only be proactive when they're not reactive, and they're reactive most of the time. And so if we want them to be proactive, we got to find ways to keep them from doing reactive things, right? And so if you throw VIPs in the mix, they're going to be responding to those kinds of things instead of doing like traffic control, those things we actually expect them to do.
And Michelle, I think of your program where you have, well, hopefully you'll get some lifeguards that, you can train over there now that we have our complex. But I know you have a lot of return employees every year that help with the rec. And that's probably great for you because you don't have to retrain them. And they know how to do all the games and the supervise and scores and stuff.
Yeah, especially in the rec department, our part-time staff, they are directly working those programs 90% of the time that a user fee has been paid for them to be there. So the fees that you pay for your child to play youth basketball directly goes to pay for those youth staff to be out there helping to run those programs. And we keep them and they come back year after year and they work all the programs they can.
Yeah, that's good. Cause then they know what they're doing and then, I mean, parents yelling at them because they know what they're doing.
Parents
It's a
still yell, we
thankless
tell them
job.
to turn their ears off.
Yeah.
I think the biggest challenge I think we're gonna face as we go through this is, and y'all, particularly Public Works, Public Safety, to some extent, I think rec, if you're going to lose a person to some other agency, I would bet that person is probably someone who's been in, what, 5 years, 6 years? If they're sitting here at 15 years of service, they're probably not going to move.
That's not actually entirely true. The guy that just left was close to mid-career. Those guys are actually the most marketable.
So
We're having no problem getting 0 to 5 officers in the door. It's those ones that are the laterals, like they're targeting our experience. And so these officers know that their experience can be negotiated. And it has been my experience over the last 3 years that it's not new people coming in, it's our mid-career folks.
Well, let me ask you this question, and maybe it's a good question, because Matt, you and I had this conversation before. Why are they going for those people? Do they not come in at the entry level when they walk in out of some other institution? Or are they walking in senior to most of the people within the existing, or the organization they're going
So
into?
most agencies statewide are giving them 1 for one, so their years of experience. So a 10-year officer here is walking into Ogden as a 10-year officer. And that was one of the things they were doing because they were having trouble getting folks in the doors. I can tell you, like, that's a brilliant tactic because every time we have to hire new staff, we're washing entire rosters and having to start over. The folks that are coming in, it's a lot harder to get quality candidates. I mean, there's a lot of interest coming into law enforcement right now, given the economy and whatnot. These are probably people you don't want being officers. And so we're not going to reduce and lower our standards just to get people in the door, but finding the people that are qualified to work here and are suited here, they're not as easy to find.
So if you hire somebody and you put an announcement, and somebody basically applies for your position, chief, and they've got 10 years experience, will they walk into Royce City with 10 years on a step 10 or wherever that is at the level they left? Or are they starting at the bottom at step 1?
No, they will, if they're actively at 10 years of service, they will walk into Royce City and they will get paid as a 10-year officer.
Okay.
But if their rate at their agency that they were at now is actually higher than ours, we could negotiate that rate and upset everybody else in the department, or they're gonna have to take the rate cut to come in the door as the 10-year officer.
That
And more
why
than
would they do
likely,
that?
they probably wouldn't come to Roy if they had to take a cut in pay, would they?
Culture matters to some people,
Yeah.
right? And
'Cause
so,
if you have some people leave that, like, please take me back,
we've had a couple come back.
yeah.
Mayor, could I say something, please?
Yeah, who are we talking?
This is Chief Williams.
Let's see, go ahead.
I just kind of want to reiterate what Matt was saying. Yes, I lost 15 employees. The majority was 1 to 5. I lost 1 to 5. However, the caution I give is I currently have 1 testing a captain, potentially leaving mid-year to another department. I've got a paramedic, which I have not talked to Matt Andrews about, over 10 years to Matt's about Ogden City. He's being offered a higher wage at Ogden City. He's probably, Braden DeBry is a phenomenal paramedic. And that's where we're kind of facing now. My fear is we will start losing mid-year employees because of how far we are behind on wages. And so as they start to compare culture to wages, as Matt said, that starts to now fade away. Even though we do have a great culture, we are going to start seeing mid-year employees leave.
Yeah, and thanks for that input, chief. Here's the challenge. And the challenge exists within every municipality and every county organization. The pool of candidates, based on the definition you provided, is not the pool of candidates within the city. It's the pool of candidates that exist within that particular skill across the entire state. And what we have done is the creation of this competition, government to government, is we are literally pulling people, and people are moving around all these different municipalities and counties, okay, as if in fact they're just going to a new job. And oftentimes it was stated, getting more money for going to that new job. There's no end to that paradigm. There is no end of how that will ever do, except end will be as after they get to the 20 or 25 or 30 years of service. There's just no end. And so if you go in and look what people are getting made at making of this city, for an example, and you start to say, and interesting enough, if you want to get something fascinated, go look what the senior leaders are making in Bountiful. You want to get surprised. It's not six figures. It's $200,000 to $300,000, okay, for doing exactly the same kinds of things we're doing here. It just feeds itself. And maybe they can say, as I see it, they can say, well, you know what? I won't go to Salt Lake because Salt Lake has its dynamics, but I can certainly go to Ogden, and they go to Ogden. And they'll sit in Ogden for a little while, and what Royce City and every other municipality will have to do, including the county, is we will raise up our salaries and we'll pull them back in at the same higher rate. And they rightly should, because they bring that kind of caliber. The challenge I think we face is that in my mind's eye, I think the system is broken. If there's nothing else the legislators ought to be thinking about would bring stability to this process would be to simply do what the state does. And the state basically says, here's what we pay for that salary. Wherever you're working in a state job, this is what we pay. Don't care if it's Brigham City or for St. George, the bottom line, this is what we pay. That's not the case with municipalities because we're independent operations. And as a result of that, we pay what the market will pay. So if we want to keep them, pay them. If you don't want to keep them, ignore them. Usually one time, and people will just leave. They can find a better job somewhere else.
And to make a quick comment on that, can I really quick just say, so after the conversations with Chief Williams and him asking for about 10%, and you look at that and we keep saying raise, 11% small increases. That's his whole entire ask right now.
Mhm.
So then you have other departments. And so that's where I have a little bit of, makes me a little bit nervous to say small increases. I don't think we're looking at a small increase for this one because you have, yeah.
No, to be honest with you, Sophie, the challenge we have is if the solution is simply property tax increase to keep everything as it is right now. And I gave you a chart in the packet I sent you, okay? It makes it very clear, within 3 years, we will double the property tax in Royce City. And if you watch that, if you look at that, 3 years from then, we're gonna double again. It will never stop. At what point do we basically say, we can't tax people that much before we have to ask the hard question, maybe it's time we have to cut. And I'm not saying cut the salaries because we have to keep them competitive. The question I'm asking would be, should we cut the services that we're providing? And that's a harder conversation to have. Because unless you cut the services and people out of this, this will never change. It can't. There's no mechanism for it to change. And so what we find ourselves would be is we just simply tax ourselves into non-existence. My fear is going to be is raise the property tax too high. And remember, businesses pay 100% of the taxable value, market value, 100%, not 55%. And all they have to do is simply go down to West Haven, and West Haven, for the most part, doesn't have a property tax. It's easy. They got open land, easier to do. And now you start to lose the very business base, which generates the sales tax by which we need to be able to sustain it. There's nothing easy about any of this. The question you have to ask ourselves, and it's a hard question, are we going to set in motion things that are going to fix this systemically now? Or are we going to push this can down the road until it basically goes into oblivion when in fact we just can't afford it? You can't afford to live here. And I don't know what that answer is. Now, if Bob Dandoy was king for the day and the recorder is on, the answer is simple. Combine Roy, Riverdale, Hooper, and West Haven into a single city, massive city, and then see what you get. Every large city, I looked at their numbers, are doing perfect. You know why Ogden basically is doing well? You know why Layton is doing well? You know why Salt Lake is doing well? And they can do everything they need to do? Is because they have deep, deep pockets and they're just simply paying what they need to pay. And everybody else is in catch up. Look at the numbers. If Roy City was as big as Ogden, was as big as Layton, it would be a different conversation at this table. But we're not. So what we have to do is take our piece and ask the hard questions. What do you think we can do to help us to find a solution to this? And it's not an easy solution by any definition. So somewhere in the middle of this, we got to balance the property tax issue for residents and business owners. And we got to balance the needs of the employees to be able to provide the services and skills we have for the commitment to the city. That's what we have to do. And the city council, with a lot of input, needs to flush out what appears to be a solution to help make that happen. Not an easy one, but it's one that has to be done. And if at the end of the day, the answer is we're going to raise property taxes 25%, then that's the decision. Makes it easy for Matt to simply carry that message. He'll bring it into the budget, and that's what you will be expected to approve when we get to June. And then plan on the next June doing the same thing again. We have to come up with $1.1 million of new money every year just to pay for merit and just to pay for COLA. We have no choice. I'm just trying to find an answer where we find that money.
I have a question. We're selling or we're trying to sell properties.
Yep.
How come, and if all that money is gonna go back into the general fund, is there any way that we could use some reserve this year? I know we didn't want to last year, but some of that money to make up this bridge of difference? I mean, is that feasible? Is it possible?
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely, it's possible, yes. The city council can elect to do something like that. One of the things about salaries and COLAs is that's going to be expected to pay the following year as well. And so you're essentially just kicking the can down the road that eventually that bill is going to be due. But if we strategize and say, well, we're going to take this and, do it next year, it's an election year and so on and so forth. But eventually speaking, the bill is going to be due.
Right.
And it would almost be like I would like to think of it like taking out a loan where you don't have that expected income to pay for that loan. Because employees, they're gonna have that cost. So eventually you would have to get rid of the employees or cut something or gain some type of revenue to cover that cost. Because that property is only those one-time funds.
So how will those monies be used because our biggest expense is personnel and we want to keep them and we want to be fair to the public.
Mm-hmm.
So couldn't we even use a portion of them
You do whatever
for
you want.
mitigation purposes?
You can.
Yeah.
The city council has the authority. In 2022, the city council decided to take $1.5 million to pay salary increases out of the fund balance. That is where that money is going to sit if it doesn't get spent. That precedent has already been set. And it didn't make any difference whether that money was generated because we sold some land up there to the credit union, or whether we in fact had it because we had some money with some tax increase. Wherever that money is in the fund balance, and however it got there, with the exception of the restricted funds that are in there, you can basically says, I'm gonna take a portion of that money out of here. I'm gonna take a portion of that money out of there, and you can pay that bill.
I think a big difference between now and then is when back in 2022 or whenever it was, we were having like 8% sales tax growth. I think that's the big difference. And so it was a mid-year budget adjustment. It was done the first council meeting in January, taken out of fund balance, and knowing that the next year we were having that 8% growth to pay for it again. And so if something like that happened, let's say the economy started really getting going and things, I mean, that would be a really good solution, right?
Right.
Like
That would
if
be
things started.
perfect solution.
Mhm. But you have to really understand, like, where are we going to pay for it tomorrow, not just today?
And that's the hard part, Brian, because we don't have that much land to sell. I know of 3 pieces, okay, which maybe give us a bridge for 3 years, but after that, what do we do then? So it's certainly an
Well,
option.
we certainly need a long-range plan. There's no doubt about that.
Great.
I mean, we've already, if it's projected to be a 25% increase in property tax over the last 3 years, we have already increased property taxes in this city by over 50%. Well, nearly 50.
Well,
I mean, 44.
I will tell you this. You got that packet from me. You look at that information in that packet on the house that's in there, and that's my house. I mean, I certainly couldn't draw any information out of the system for somebody else, so I use mine. It's in there. And then you look how high my property tax has gone, okay, and what I'm paying for my house today and what I was paying 5 years ago or 10 years ago. That's no comparison. And then look what I projected what it will be in 3 years from now. This conversation is as serious as a heart attack. We need to find a solution that's going to satisfy the needs of this city, of the employees, certainly the residents, of how we move forward. And interesting enough, this body is the body that will do that and can do that. And if you simply says, here's my strategy. I want a little bit here, I want a little bit there, I want some of this and I want some of that. And I said in the very beginning, and I'll say it again for the public record, I do not see Royse City moving forward without having a continuous property tax increase. I say modest. You define what modest means. At least for the next 5 or 10 years. Every flippin' year. I don't see how you can get out of that because there is nothing on the horizon that I can see that is going to generate enough revenue in this city to be able to make up for $1.1 million every year. Nothing.
And
In
then
our
look at how
city,
much our roundabout's gonna cost. I mean, the cost of cement goes up, cost of asphalt,
pay for that.
everything. Pipes.
And we gotta put the chemicals in the swimming pools or shut down the
Right.
swimming pools. And we're not putting fertilizer on the lawns, then what's gonna happen to our parks? Why have them if in fact all they are is just a dust ball?
Right.
And if you're not giving bullets, okay, to the police officers to practice with, then all I can say to you would be is, let them go out there and buy them on themselves if we think we can get away with that. There's nothing easy about any of this.
Right.
But it does suggest is, this is where you're going to earn every dime that you basically get paid from the city. You've got to come up with some ideas that are going to sit at the needs of both the residents and the employees. And we still got to provide those services. And I promise you, you're gonna have some sleepless nights making this happen. Because sometime between now and I hope sometime between now and March, you're gonna tell the city manager, here's what I need to do, so he can tell every department head, follow these instructions, and you have a budget ready for signature in June. I don't know how you get around that. Otherwise, this is how it's gonna go down. City manager has an obligation by law to provide you a budget on 1 May. He'll give you that budget. If you don't like that 25% property taxes, it's no longer his problem. He's met the statutory requirements of providing you a budget. It is now your problem whether or not you approve it or don't approve it. And if you don't approve it so that we don't violate the state law that says we have to have a balanced budget, then basically you need to tell him that says, I want this cut, I want this cut, and this cut. So you either do it now or you do it later. But he needs to walk out of here between now and March with an idea of what you want him to do so that he can provide and meet his requirements and make it easier by the time we get to June. I don't see any other choices.
I think that it is such a big, important discussion and long-term project that education to the public is going to be really important so they can understand what's coming. It's not like they feel like, you know, they're being taken by surprise or anything. And so maybe as we start getting some ideas, even having some town halls or something, just so we can have education involvement, maybe they will understand better when they can see what the details are. And I think that's really important.
Diane, everything you said is absolutely right. This is an educational moment. And I can't help to think at the end of the day, if the city council and senior staff has taken out and looked under every rock, looked at all the crevices, assessed the pros and cons, and they come back and simply says, this is really the best choice we've got going forward. Just the fact that you put the energy into it, you've looked under every rock, you can defend your position because the alternative is something they probably cannot live with. So I agree. And if we need to take a show and basically open a town hall, we need to be more public, then I say, let's do it. I'm up to that. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to approve a budget. And that budget has to be approved in June. And if you do a truth in taxation, that finalizes in August. And we need to finish this. But I'm asking you to think about this in terms of the long haul. It's not just this moment. We've got enough money in the budget you approved to get us there. We'll get to June. We'll be fine. It's what happens after that and the years after that that we need. Because as long as the system is we're going to compete with every government entity that wants our people, then you better be thinking about what it's going to cost to keep them. And that has to be factored in. Because they're going to get taken.
Or they're gonna leave.
Yeah, well, to me, I almost guarantee if you can offer them an extra $3 or $4 an hour, they're gone anyway. And there's not a thing we can do. Now, maybe my action needs to be to sit down with those mayors and say, you need to stop doing this to us. You need to stop basically building these kingdoms and basically just forcing everybody to move that. Maybe that is, maybe they'll look at the data I looked at and simply says, maybe I just got to start cutting services because I can't afford this anymore. I don't know what they're doing, but I'll tell you what, this is madness. I've never in my entire career ever seen government robbing government as much as it competing against government. It's a fallacy, okay, in terms of how we're supposed to manage, but we have got it. We're living through it. The challenge now would be is how do we mitigate the impacts to our people? And that is not going to be easy. So get creative, ask the right questions, sit down with the department heads. You learned a lot of information here. You've got some real insight with the question you asked. Just explore those. Come back to the next meeting. We'll do it in a few weeks. That says, hey, let's look at this. I think we might be able to do that. Let's come up with some ideas that you think might be something this council is willing to support and be able to direct Matt to do. And if at the end of the day, you simply says, we're not going to do this anymore, then that's the decision. Or I'm going to have the property taxes, and that's the decision. Those are certainly two bookends to this problem, and you can certainly just rest on either one of them, and we will get there. But I think the less impact to the entire operation is some options in the middle. And I think you can do that. And I'm certainly not going to sit on my hands and not offer some ideas. I'm going to offer some ideas. But we need to collectively come up with solutions that's going to work. Otherwise, I'll go back to the comment, Michelle, you made. If Michelle can't put the chemicals in the water and creates an unsafe environment for the people who use her services, shut the pool down. Because to do otherwise, you put human life at risk. Can't do that. She's got to have, if you're gonna say that pool stay open, then give her the resources that she's going to need to basically make that happen. In all honesty, Michelle, that 7.5 had much more brutality on your organization than any other organization here. I seen the numbers. You took the heavy hit on that, okay? Heavy hit. I don't expect to see that again if we expect to do anything with Parks and Recreations. At the end of the day, you make that decision, though. Okay?
So maybe some information, maybe I can ask Michelle and Brandon this, in your departments, where do you find some of the most difficult decisions? We've got the staff and then we've got supplies. And the 7.5% was, based, that cut was based, it sounds like mostly on supplies and stuff. Where do you find your biggest challenges? Maybe I'll start with you, Brandon, and you can kind of discuss where those challenges.
I mean, yeah, I think all of us department heads can agree. My biggest challenge is keeping good staff, knowledgeable staff. I always say I turn a one-man job into a two-man job as soon as I lose a guy because I'm losing the experience. And so that's my main thing. I do differ a little bit from these guys. I am the 5 to 6 years. That's the ones that hurt the most. Cause usually once, and I hate to put a dollar figure on it. I think it used to be around $20. Now I think it's creeping up 25, 26. That's kind of my threshold. I hate to say it, but that's kind of when I get a guy locked in, is once I can get him in that pay range, because, going to another city is tough. So that's my biggest hurdle. And like I said, yes, cutting the budgets definitely is tough, but I'll pick it 100 times over versus giving my guys a raise. So like, that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and I would agree with Brandon. My department differs a little bit from the public safety as far as keeping those 1 to 5 to 6 year employees in, because there is so many cities around, there are so many private industries that offer, that require those same skills, those same services. So that's my priority, is keeping those guys. As far as the operations cut, I reduced some internal stuff, so we took away like all of our training and things like that. So I'm also nervous that if I can't begin to offer the training and the certificates and those type of networking experiences, that they may want to leave anyway. So I think everybody can say the same thing. It's a combination, but definitely if we take care of the people, they're going to take care of your city.
Weren't you trying to give them like some of those part-time employees, like if they came back the following season, like $100 bonus or something, just something little?
We have
To
a
get 'em-
very small
Yeah.
bonus program in place for those part-time employees.
That's a
Every
lot to
quarter,
go.
if they work so many hours and they don't show for shifts and things like that, we have that as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an incentive to get their lazy butts out of bed on Saturday mornings. My kids used to do it, so.
Don't work with teenagers.
Yeah.
Okay, council, giving you a lot of details. Randy, do you have anything you want to share?
I'm good here.
Good night.
Chief Ryan?
Chief, you still on?
Yeah, I just want to make a point. I don't want to make light of a horrific accident in California, but I think it paints a good picture of decisions made that affected thousands and thousands of lives. And I know there's a political side, which I don't want to get into because I don't know all the facts, but I can only speak to from what I heard from the fire side, from decisions where their budget was cut over $1 million, which affected staffing and other resources for the fire department. And then we know there are issues with fire hydrants, which, and I don't know the specifics if it's public works, but we know there wasn't water in the fire hydrants. That affected their ability to perform their services. So that kind of ties in our public works. We know that police officers support the fire department a great deal, whether it's evacuation, shutting down roads. They played an integral part in trying to save a community. And so all that tied together, and this same with the parks. I mean, really, all of us are hurting really bad, and this is a really hard decision. But I think what we can do, I think that this has been a really informative meeting. Cutting service is really, really dangerous. I think we're to that point where we're really lean. I really hope that we could combine, come together. And I'm with all the directors that have spoken. We have to keep the current employees we've got from walking somehow. But I think if that's not a paints a clear picture of what happened in the Palisades fires, I don't know what else does. And the dangers of the decisions we all make collectively, because our job is to help the citizens of Roy get the best services possible, do it with the least amount of money, but fearful of cutting services. I think the fire in California is a really good scenario of what potentially would happen to us. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. Yeah, and there's some evidence suggesting is that I think California, and you may know this one, California basically is the single biggest state in the union where in fact the building is taking place in some of those areas that are just terribly susceptible to wildfires. And they went on building. And as you can see, in this case, is the evidence is what's happening. Interesting enough, Utah is the second biggest contributor where people are building into a wildfire area that they shouldn't be building in. And so it wouldn't take much for them, a similar situation happening in our own backyard. I mean, it's very conceivable. So thanks, Chief, for your input. Brian, anything else you want to share?
Me particular?
Yeah.
I have a question for Michelle, that the users to the aquatic were up by about 12,000, I think is what I've seen. If you took a day of operation away, would those numbers still trend upward, or would we kill the part?
Well, if you took a day of operation away at the aquatic center, you still have all of the operation fees that go along with it. So, I mean, we would still have to pay for all the chemicals, the heat, like everything. The only thing you'd be taking away is a small chunk of personnel charge, or the personnel to be there. I can't tell you if the admissions would still continue to go up. I can look at the numbers from, excuse me, when we reduced the Sunday, we took away the Sundays. I would imagine they would go down.
Yeah, a lot of people were mad when you did away with Sunday, because a lot of people, that was their only day
That's their
off.
weekend, yeah.
Yeah,
Are you, you're open Sunday now,
No,
right? Are
no.
you off?
We're not open Sunday.
Sorry, the complex. And
Oh,
so what about the
The
aquatic?
complex is not open Sunday
Right, what
either.
about the aquatic center in the summer?
no,
No.
we did away with that. Then it recoups, I mean, haven't you like pretty much done every booked every night after 6 o'clock through the whole summer that you rent that out?
Yeah, we've
So-
got about
And didn't we close on Sundays because lack of lifeguards? It was a lifeguard coverage issue. Yeah. Are we going to have that issue again with the complex being back open and us kicking our lifeguard program back off?
We hope not. They're starting to train everybody and get people back on, so we're optimistic that we'll still be able to have the coverage. Would we have enough to cover Sundays at the aquatic center? I would doubt it. We're maxing out how many hours these kids can and want to work. And so a benefit to be here is that Sunday off, because they know they have one dedicated day off, and then we stagger them throughout the rest.
They can only work 5 hours, right?
Hmm,
5
they
hours,
can-
no, if they're like under a certain age,
If they
without
are
having lunch or break.
under 16. I believe they can only work up to 8 hours a day, 7 hours a day in the summer. I would have to double check.
Any other questions?
But it's
Diane?
open 11 to 6. huh?
Not right now. You just give me another minute or
Night.
two. and I'll come up with something.
Give you another minute, but we may be adjourned. Sophie, any other comments?
Nope, nope. You've opened up the door, so this is
Yeah. And
nice to
any
do this.
comments?
No, I was just gonna say to Theron, because I actually, when those fires came in California and I heard that they'd cut the budget, I was actually thinking of Theron. I mean, obviously, we're not gonna have a fire here in Roy City. I mean, a building could start on fire, but some of our old buildings, but it's never gonna be anything like that. I mean, and then the Santa Ana winds, we're never gonna have those. That was probably once in a lifetime, 100-mile-an-hour winds that, you know, made that fire spread so fast, and just breaks my heart for all those people. But I thought about all of the people that came around and helped, and I thought if the Uintas or Ogden Valley or any of those places up there start on fire, we would want people that knew what they were doing to go up there. I mean, we could have an earthquake. That would probably be the disaster that'll hit us, is earthquakes. If Pine View Dam burst, I think we're safe. I don't know. I always think about all these things in my head, where my family lives and stuff. And so, but I thought, I'm sure happy, you know, I'm glad that they had qualified people, but with their budget cut, you never know. I mean, they had to wait for help from all surrounding, and they would have had all more people there. I mean, they couldn't control, you know, Mother Nature, but still they could have maybe got a handle on it and maybe saved a few more homes. But because they did cut their budget so much, just breaks my heart about all the loss of families and then all those animals that are being shipped to Utah because they don't have homes, and it's just a horrible thing. But I actually was thinking about our fire department and all of our cuts and how hard that is on the city, so.
That's out of my question. Okay, here's my question. With the loss of homes that we incurred in regards to property taxes, and we keep this same level, so if nothing happens with property tax money, you know, if we get 100,000 last year, we get 100,000 this year, but now we have less homes and businesses. Does that mean that the property tax rate increases amongst all of the remaining homes to bring that up or not?
No.
I mean, you could go through like mathematically and equalize it that way, but
I'm talking about
that's not, yeah,
the-
it's not how it works. Yeah.
I don't believe it does. I believe they keep the same rate. if
Yeah.
I'm not correct. So they would keep that same rate and divide it over the homes that are left.
And so then our total amount would actually
Would
come
actually
down.
decrease,
Okay,
yes.
I just want to clarify that, make sure.
It's
Because
the
the-
same thing. If we add homes, then we
Mhm.
do increase the amount that we get. So if we would decrease homes, we would get less amount.
Yeah, the more rooftops we have, the more property taxes we collect, which is why we're like, it behooves us to turn around and get some of these developments kicked off and going, because it's new property tax revenue that we pick up, as well as sales tax revenue for whatever the household takes and spends as well. So,
Great, just wanted to check.
Okay. Well, hey, thank you. I think we had a really good conversation. Again, this is the first of a couple. Please come back with your ideas. City staff is ready to sit down with you one-on-one if necessary. Coordinate that with Matt so that he can kind of coordinate this in, but just ask the hard questions. There's certainly a lot of data, a lot of information available to you. Get imaginative, think of some ideas, come back, and then let's flush this out and make sure you feel comfortable. It may take us a couple of sessions before we're able to give them that clear direction, but we may need to do that. So don't hesitate to ask the hard questions. Excuse me. With that then, do I have anything else? Anybody else wants to share?
Nope.
Thought? I will say one thing. Chief, you'll appreciate this one, because Matt and I had this little joke. $250,000 for animal control. Okay? That's a hard bite. That's a hard bite
Not for external, for the shelter.
Yeah.
for shelter. Not your team. I'm talking about what we have to pay to county. $250,000 a year. Just set that one in your equation. So
When does the bond expire? 27? 28?
28, that's about $70,000 a year. We pay just because we have to pay into the shelter. The rest of it is actually paid for all the other services that they currently provide. So, a little expensive. Okay, with that then, do I have a motion then to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Ann. Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposed? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for coming.
Thanks all.
Night, right here, you in Florida?
Outside.
Yes, but it's raining. It's horrible. Bad weather.
Feel so sorry for that guy.
It's 20 degrees here, so put your wine.
It was 40. It was 40 in Florida with a 90% humidity. So there's that.
Wow.
It was bad.
Yeah, it snowed in Louisiana today.
Yeah, no, I had a coworker come from Tennessee and it was like 17 degrees when he flew out.
They were having a heyday. I watched them sledding. They don't know how to shovel.
Don't worry about it.
Alabama, they don't have plows. They're telling people. to camp.
Right, right.
Isn't that crazy that they can get out of the weather?
All right, thanks all. Have a good night.
Not having to go to school, you know, snow days.
You're right. And I've been South Ogden, I've been North Ogden. North Ogden. South Ogden has theirs in the
You.
They have running water, power, and they have